Welcome to That's What She Said, where we'll spill the tea on women empowerment in the Great Lakes Bay region with your host, Christiana Malacara.
Hi, and welcome to That's What She Said. We are on That's What She Said Day, and that is an awesome thing that we've made it yet through the week once again. And I just have to always make these little plugs, right, of the things that I reflected on throughout the week, from day to day, from week to week. And here now, this week I was thinking about the environment. And we're not talking about hugging trees and saving all the bumblebees, right? Which is all good and dandy, but the environment that you put yourself in. I had a friend come to me, and she texted me because she was very, very excited. She's like, I got this really awesome job. I've been searching and it finally happened. And I instantly was very excited for her, right? I'm like, let me share this joy with my friend. But I knew some people that she was sharing that with, they had to make a decision of, am I going to be joyful for her, or am I going to say, good for you, and then take that energy and say, I wish I would have had that opportunity. I wish that could have been me. But instead, you are sharing that joy with your friend. And as I did, I was like, congratulations. I'm so excited for you. But is this the environment that you want to be in? Is this what you wanted? And she stopped texting me, and I'm like, oh no, all those girly thoughts came in. What did I say? What did I do? Is that too forward? Did I say something wrong? And then she texted me back and she says, thank you for asking me that. Yes, I had to ask myself that question too. So then throughout the week, I'm talking about environment, thinking about environment. Is this where I want to be? Is this a situation that I need to be in? And is this a situation I need to remove myself from? So a piece of advice that I'd like to pass on to all of the listeners today, and to kind of challenge yourself, especially as we move into a new week. And is this the environment that I'm creating for myself, or is someone else creating this environment for me? Is this somewhere that I need to be, or is this somewhere that I need to remove myself? Because yes, you deserve to be in an environment that is going to build you. And that's exactly what our guest does. She builds awesome environments for amazing youth, adults, community workers. As a boss babe, I said it, as a boss babe, she creates an amazing, welcoming environment for her employees and beyond. Today we have Kathryn Tate. Hi, Kathryn.
Hi, Christiana. How are you today?
I'm so good because you're here in the guest chair, and I get to fire some questions at you, and we get to pick your brain on what it's like to just, one, be a pillar in the community, two, manage that as a woman, and three, let's save three for later. So, Kathryn, can you share with us how the community would know you?
So as a title, my title is President and CEO of the Legacy Center for Community Success. In that space, I mean, it sounds like it's a big title, I guess. Like, it took me 3 years to be comfortable with that title. But in that space, I'm in a lot of community organizations. I am in collaborative groups. People see me at Health and Human Services Council. They see me in coalition meetings. They see me in presentations. A lot of people have seen or heard me present on youth development. And so those are the spaces that I mostly operate in. With that Legacy Center bent, we talk about youth development, we talk about literacy services, and we talk about substance use prevention. So you'll find me in any of those spaces.
Those are all very big, heavy categories.
Yes.
Each of them have an entire, pool behind them, and you're working within all these categories. Is there something that really drove you to this position? You're like, this is where I need to be.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to dig back here. I know that you said if I have a story, we're going to tell it. So I've always really been interested in child development and like family dynamics. That's always been an interest for me. And so when I went to college, I went to Purdue University and I studied human development and kind of tried to figure out what space I wanted to be in there. And I will tell you that nonprofit was not the space I expected.
Okay.
After a few years, I was looking at maybe something connected to university outreach. I didn't know exactly. But so my first job out was at Purdue Extension, and so we did the outreach aspect of the university, educating families and consumers in a community about best practices for their homes and their families. And then my husband graduated with his doctorate, and we had to go move somewhere else, and we landed here. And I ended up at the Social Security Administration. Which was an interesting fit and maybe not the place where I shined the best. And so after almost a decade there, I was ready to find something that got me back to people and connecting and giving back to our community and also getting back to that youth development piece. And I'm looking for jobs, and this job with the Legacy Center pops up as a community integration person, community integration specialist, I think was my term. And I was going to be responsible in that role for bringing together people to keep kids from getting into trouble. And as I was researching the Legacy Center, something jumped out at me, and it was that they are rooted in the 40 developmental asset framework. And
What's that?
So 40 Assets comes from an organization called Search Institute. They're based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and they've been studying what it takes to make kids thrive for 50 years. And what they found through their research is that there are 40 things that kids need. It's support and empowerment and boundaries, and they need opportunities to stretch and grow themselves. And then while those things are happening for them, they're becoming who they're going to be inside. They're building their values and what matters to them and how they feel about themselves.
So what fascinated you most about that portion?
So it goes back to my childhood. When I was 17 years old, my dad was on a committee back in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where I grew up. And that committee introduced him to the 40 assets. And I remember him coming home from that meeting that night, and he handed me this list of 40. And he said, "How many of these do you think you have?" And that stuck with me. And I don't know why that stuck with me, but it really stuck with me. And I think I remember having something over 20, probably 24, 25. And now that I'm sitting in my seat, I understand the importance of having a lot of these developmental assets. Kids need at least 20 just to keep them out of like basic trouble. And they need 25 or more to like feel really good about themselves on the inside. And so that really stuck with me. And when I saw that the Legacy Center was grounded in this 40 assets, I was like, I think this is where I'm supposed to be. And like in a way that I don't know you normally feel, I felt like this rush of go here. And they like disregarded 8 years of doing work that wasn't related at all and saw the connection to my job at Purdue Extension and the work that I had done in the community there. And they said, yeah, this is the right person for this job. And I'm forever grateful for that, because here I am 8 years later, and it has turned into a passion project for me and something that I love being where I'm at right now. So that's kind of how I got there. That was a long and twisted way to get there.
Which they all are. I'm
Mhm.
learning as a trend, it's a long and twisted path, but we have to, learn to navigate your way through that. And
Mhm.
okay, we have to unpack what was that you just told me, like 15 years right now here in the past 3 minutes.
Mhm.
Okay. So let's unpack that. You started out by saying that you were in this job when you moved to Michigan, that you did not glow, you did not grow, you
Mhm.
did not, feel like you were thriving. Why was it that you stayed there for so long if you felt that way?
I think it was like a family dynamic thing. My husband and I are both super cautious when it comes to making sure that we're able to make ends meet and that we're able to support our family. For whatever reason, for various reasons, it was really important for us to have the stability of a government job. I was in a government role. And that stability provided us what we needed at the time, but it didn't allow me to thrive. And at some point, that started to spill over, and we could feel that affecting family dynamics. And it was at that point that it was like, okay, regardless of the stability piece, something has to change because it's not healthy for our family to continue this path. But it took a while, and there were things that I loved about that job. I don't want to say that it wasn't a great place to be. I didn't have the opportunity to be creative and to interact with the community and the public in the way that I wanted to. And I didn't know how important that was to me.
So how I, navigated through the beginning of this conversation was putting yourself in an environment, right? So the way that I guess I'm seeing that is you were in an environment that you felt you needed to be in, but necessarily didn't want to be in.
I would say that's true, especially in the last few years where I was recognizing the stress it was putting on me not to be able to wholly be who I was. I'm a natural leader. I have been thinking and reflecting on that a lot lately. If I see a leadership void, I don't even think about it. I just kind of step into that void to make sure that there is direction. And that wasn't a space I could do that in. And more power to the folks that can do that day in and day out. That job required a lot of organization, a lot of paperwork. If you talk to my staff today, you will find that is not my forte. Not my forte.
So you had to learn what you're good at. Like, this is what I'm good at. How do I make this flourish?
Yes.
How did you do that portion?
How did you learn? Yeah. Oh, how did I learn?
How did you learn what you were good at?
Some of it was learning what I'm not good at.
Ooh.
That time that I spent at Social Security, I learned that, I can do those jobs. I can be moderately organized. I can make sure that I'm following the guidelines and the rules. And I think I learned a lot too about what is the importance of having guidelines and rules and boundaries, right? I learned about that, but I also I learned that when you're not in the right fit, it takes away from your well-being. That's something that because I've been through that experience of not being in a good fit, I'm able to look at my team differently and recognize that sometimes I have a mismatch. And if we can make an adjustment to how we're organizing things, responsibilities, and the way that we're operating as a team, then maybe we can solve that problem. And we have solved a number of problems by just doing some rearranging and finding what people's strengths are and playing to those strengths.
Wow. That that blew my mind. So we're picking up traits along the way. So you graduated, your husband graduated, you moved to Michigan. Yay, you're here. And we're getting and navigating out of a job. But you had this flashback moment of dad handing you this paper and saying, hey, how many of these can you check? What? You said that was like a core memory. What was that? What can you unload that moment for us, for the listeners who are like, I have a core memory, but it's not as defined as this. What did that look like for you?
I think it just made me reflect. I was 17 at the time, I think. I'm pretty sure it was my last year of high school. Maybe it was my junior year. And when you go through that list of 40 developmental assets, you have to think about who are the people that support me? What opportunities have I been given? I think it gives you a sense of gratitude, intentionally or not, or at least for me, it gave me a sense of gratitude. Like, my parents invested a lot in me. So my brothers are much older than I am. I am 6 years younger than my closest brother. And so I had a lot of years of being in the home as a single child, as an only child. And I know that most of my conversations with my parents were in the cars between vehicles or between activities, right? Mom picked me up from band. She drove me to diving practice. We were back and forth between activities. And as a teenager, you don't understand the value of that. But man, as an adult, and I think this is maybe the point where I started understanding how important that stuff was. Because reflecting back now, there were a lot of mentors that were placed into my life because of that. There were a lot of positive peers and good kids who surrounded me and helped me to become a better person as a teenager, all of which set me off on this path to success.
So mom and dad were pouring into you without you even realizing it at the time.
Yep.
That takes a pretty awesome mom and dad to see that they need to do that.
Yeah, incredibly privileged to have really great parents who made sure that all three of us were able to be successful. Yeah.
And you're the baby.
I'm the baby. That comes with all kinds of baggage.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's yep.
Baby, but you said you spent time as, the only child at
Mhm.
home. So this is an interesting dynamic. Are you the only daughter?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, now we're here.
Yep.
All right. So here we are getting, some golden treatment from mom and dad.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
My brothers would tell you that.
Oh, well.
If you're listening, I don't think that's true.
I love it. So dad hands you this list. You're 17. I would think if my dad handed me this list at 17, yes, I would want to take a moment and read through it, right? But that's, current 35-year-old me that would say, yes, please read through that.
Yeah.
As a 17-year-old, you're like, Dad, I want to go to the movies. I need to go here. This is a list of 40. This is going to take me forever. But you actually took a moment to read through that. Were there some of those things when you took it back to dad? Was there guilt in saying, hey, Dad, I only checked off 20?
Mm-mm. I don't actually remember the follow-up conversation. And that's an interesting component that I don't really remember much about that. I remember that moment of, look at this. What do you think you have? And I'm sure that we had a follow-up conversation. But, it's funny. I don't know that I thought about that again until I applied to Legacy Center, until I saw that. And I was like, wait a second. This is not new to me. There were a few times along the way after that I ran across the developmental assets and was like, oh yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good thing to remember. But it wasn't something that was so intentional in my everything.
Yeah. It wasn't your everyday.
No.
Until now.
Ask my kids.
Ooh.
My one son, he rolled his eyes at me one day and said, nobody wants to talk about that, Mom.
Well, I do. Well, now we're going to forward him this.
Right.
And we're talking about it. Okay. So why and how is this list so important in the environment that you're in now?
So this list is important, period. Like if you have a young person in your world, you should know the 40 assets, and it should be something you're thinking about. No one person is capable of doing all 40 assets for a kid, but every single person who interacts with the kid can be a little bit of an asset builder. And when we all do our part, we're going to raise a really solid next generation. So what were you looking for again on that one? Sorry, I got off.
No, that was powerful. Well, I'm going to ask you this then. Is this list as simple as a Google away?
Oh yeah.
For listeners that are like, what is Kathryn talking about? She's at the Legacy Center. She's doing all these awesome things, but like, how can I bring this home?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely available. So I think for adults, it's more knowing that it exists and thinking about, in this moment with this kid, this teen, and 40 assets are applicable for all ages. How can I make this moment matter? It can be as simple as every morning I try to make a point to say my next door neighbors, say hello to him by name, and let him know that I know him and I care about him. Like that is a very simple thing that I can do. But in doing so, he knows that there's someone else in his neighborhood who cares about him and that he can trust.
So you're building blocks. Let's take this same concept and shift it for the next 5 minutes here and focus on how we can navigate these questions to youth that are going to be the women who run the world. How can we shift these questions and tailor them towards our young ladies in the community? Yeah.
I think anytime you can be a mentor for a young lady or a young man, anytime you can be a mentor, it's you don't have to have the right words. You don't have to have the right, you don't have to do all the things. Showing up and showing that you care are huge. I've talked to youth since we do a youth study in Midland County. We look at the developmental assets kids have, and then we share the results to the whole community so that our community knows how to wrap around our kids. And I had a group of kids tell me, we just need somebody to show up for us. So look around your circle. Is there a young lady that you could be a mentor to? Are you a leader who can show someone else how to be a leader just by example and by showing up for them? That may be all it takes. We can all reflect back and think about that adult in our life who maybe said, do you know you have leadership skills? I had people that said that to me and I didn't believe them. Because we can see things in people that they can't see in themselves. And so as an adult mentor, that I think that's key. Like, look for those kids around you and how can you just show them that you care? I think that's at the core. And we're all going to do that in different ways. We're all going to have, maybe it's a more technical approach. Maybe it's a more teaching approach. Maybe it's just a friend approach. But we're all going to have our gift for showing up for people, for kids.
You've already said a few times that you are a leader, and I fully believe it. When was the moment that you realized and you had to look through somebody else's scope and say, maybe I actually am? You know what I mean, though? You're kind of like, I'm just doing this. I'm just doing what I need to do and what feels right. And then when was that moment where you're like, yep, I'm taking this title. I'm a leader.
It's been recent.
Oh.
It's been recent.
But how long have you been in this leadership role?
This one, 5.5 years. And it's been recent.
Okay, tell me about that.
So truthfully, people talk about how you build confidence. And I had all the things, right? I had all the things. I had adults in my life. I had mentors. I had good friends that would say, you're doing great. You're a great leader. I never felt like I was a great leader until, I kid you not, the Legacy Center didn't fall apart during COVID. And when we emerged out of COVID and we had enough money to pay our staff and keep our programs running, and then our programs started to grow, all of a sudden I kind of stepped back and I said, oh, I'm actually okay at this. And then over the last, I would say 18 months, I've really been able to embrace that more. And I've finally found my confidence. I'm still super quiet and humble about it. So this is like uncomfortable talk for me. But I do feel like I've finally embraced it in my 40s.
You're great. You're so great on so many levels right now. Okay, so I'm pushing you out of your comfort zone here.
Absolutely, but that's okay.
And there you go. And you're okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's a great opportunity to grow.
See, here we go. As a leader. So just recently you're like, hey, I'm a leader. This is cool.
Mm-hmm.
I made it happen. Have you seen any other parts of your life come together because of that mental decision?
I think I'm just less hard on myself. I think I used to question everything. I would talk through every decision because I didn't trust my own decision making. My poor husband has listened to hours of me just unloading and processing problems. And in the last year and a half to 2 years, I don't feel like I have to unload quite as much.
And we are going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk about confidence in and out of the workplace with Kathryn Tate from the Legacy Center. Tune back in.
That's What She Said with Christiana Malacara is back. Now let's spill the tea.
And we are back to Spill the Tea with Miss Kathryn Tate. And we left off this very high point of our conversation, honestly. We had just discovered that in the past 18 months, Miss Kathryn Tate, who runs a whole shindig, she's in charge of an entire organization called the Legacy Center here in Midland, Michigan. And she just said the past 18 months, she's really had that confidence boost and said, hey, I'm a leader. I'm a leader and it's okay. And we're doing good. And, it's okay to pat yourself on the back and give yourself the kudos and a thumbs up. And then she said this part right now where she said, well, I'm getting pushed out of my comfort zone and it's okay. And there's comfort in knowing that it's okay to be pushed out of your comfort zone because your confidence is being boosted. What other parts of your life have really aligned? Has work gone smoother? Has home life gone smoother? Is being a mom and momming easier with this new hat of confidence? Maybe not the mom part. That's always tough. I know.
My kids are great. I actually feel like a more confident mom with teenagers than I did with little kids. And I spent most of my life with little kids. I think I'm just more okay in my own skin. And that reflects in all parts of my life. I know that there are going to be times when I'm super stressed out and I'm working 60 hours a week because that's what the job requires for this stretch. I know that there are stretches where it's not going to be as demanding. I know that as long as I show up for my kids and I'm intentional and I'm in tune with them when they're ready for me, that they're going to be okay. And I'm able to step out into other spaces in the community and say, I know how to do that. I'm becoming a kind of a behind the scenes grant writer for my family robotics. There's a whole robotics thing in my household. Both of my kids do robotics. My husband's their coach.
What?
Oh yeah. It's a
you
whole
have an in-home robotics team?
No,
okay.
no, not in my home, but no, but 3/4 of my family's involved in robotics and it's an expensive hobby.
Yeah.
But it's so good for the kids. It goes back to those developmental assets.
Okay.
So good for the kids. It's really good for my husband. He's got a great hobby out of it. And it requires fundraising and grant writing. And I'm finally able to step back and say, those are things I know how to do in my work job. I can help develop this program as an adult mentor who's helping kids learn how to write grants, helping kids figure out how to fundraise. And I'm able to do some of that because I finally see myself as being successful in that space in my workplace. I don't know that it's necessarily changed our family dynamics. I think that my kids have started to see me as a community leader, and that's got its whole it's got pros and cons to it. They get really annoyed when we go out in public and we can't leave anywhere because everyone wants to talk to me.
Because you're popular and paparazzi's everywhere,
Right.
Come on, Mom.
But they also can see that because people want to talk to me, I'm respected. And I think that changes their perspective of me. I'm speculating and putting stuff on my kids here that I don't know is true. It just seems like that's a dynamic that has shifted in our household.
We'll circle back and text them later and be like, hey, am I actually a cool mom? I can semi-relate to that, radio life here. I can relate to this. And there is an annoyance, you're trying to get through Kroger or Meijer and all of a sudden, hey, right? But when you're saying the kids see you in this light as a leader, is that something that you've always planned? Yes, I need to be a leader to show my kids.
Mm-mm.
She's shaking her head no.
No.
What was that then? What example was it that you wanted to develop for your kids?
That's a great question and not one I've ever spent a lot of time thinking about. I have always wanted my kids to, because I have 2 boys, and so I've always wanted my kids to be comfortable around female leadership. I don't know a time in my life where I didn't have female leaders that I could look up to. And I thank my parents for that because of the spaces that they had us in. I would never want my kids to think that a female couldn't be as good at doing a job as they are. And so I think that, yes, I always wanted them to be able to respect women, but I never really put a lot of thought into the leadership piece of that. But I think they see how my husband, supports me as a leader. He is fully on board with my decisions to be out in the public or to, um,
Do
to
things
take
like
this
this?
job,
Okay.
be on the radio. He might even be listening today.
Awesome. So having that support from your husband, what did that mean for you while you're kind of, you're climbing this ladder, trying to get to that, yes, I did it result?
Mhm.
What did that support look like from him?
Well, it looks like lots of just being my sounding board, but also having him be willing to say, yes, you should do that. And I know that might make it trickier for our family, but this is good for you. And if it's good for you, it's good for all of us.
That's a pretty bold statement for him to say.
He's a pretty good guy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, congratulations on that. Finding a good guy out there. Wow. So when we're looking for that soundboard person, just to the listeners, like that really can be anyone.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
neighbor that you wave to, right?
Right.
Someone that is your mentor, your producer for your show. There's people in your life that can be that soundboard. Was there anyone else in your life that you're a soundboard for them?
I think I'm probably a sounding board for more people than I realize.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you okay with that?
I am. Yeah. I'm actually pretty comfortable with it. I try really hard not to give advice and just to help people know that it's okay to struggle through where you're at and just to listen, because sometimes people just need to unload. It's not uncommon for staff members to come in and close the door and just kind of let me know what's going on outside of work life and how that's going to spill over and affect their work for a while. And I think the fact that I can offer grace in those spaces helps them to just know it's okay. I think sometimes people ask me for advice. I maybe sometimes give advice unwillingly, or that's not welcomed. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I also assume that you're taking my words with a grain of salt, and people have to pave their own pathway. But I'm okay with being considered a mentor.
So when someone does come to you and they're like, I have this thing going on, when do you know to listen or to lead?
Well, I always start with listening. I don't think that we can know how to lead somebody unless we know what's going on. It's like when you talk to kids, you should start with curiosity. So this was a story that happened in our household not too long ago. One of my kids got in trouble at school. It was a complex thing. It was this piled onto this, and here we are. And I thought, and I literally stepped back and I said, okay, what should I do from a developmental asset standpoint? I'm leaning on that research. What should I do? Because a lot of parents, I think, will come down on their kids hard. You got in trouble. You screwed up. You're grounded. My husband and I talked about it, and we decided to approach it first from, tell us what happened. And when we unpacked that, started peeling back the layers, we found that there had been some stuff that had shifted at school, and he was trying to find his place, and just something escalated, and it was not the thing that we thought it could have been. If we had gone in as a leader and said, this is what you have to do to make it up, that changed the way that we approached that whole circumstance. He and I spent a lot of quality time together that weekend. And that was okay. That was okay. And he felt it, and he knew how he needed to change things to be better. But we were able, I was able to lead through that because I understand developmental science for kids. I understand that I needed to know what was happening. And then we had to problem solve. And sometimes I think the leadership comes through the problem solving. I don't know that necessarily I have to tell you this is the right thing to do, but rather say, what's going on here? And what are the pieces of the puzzle that need to be put together? One of my favorite things, and I've figured out, like, my brain is happiest when it's working on a puzzle.
Oh,
I
okay.
love having a puzzle, and I'll spend like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour sometimes just sitting in the basement putting together
An
a
actual puzzle.
An actual
A
puzzle.
jigsaw puzzle.
A jigsaw puzzle, old school. But also, I find that I approach every problem with a puzzle. I look at our agency budget as a puzzle. I know what each of those pieces of the puzzle can do, and I try to figure out how we can make the most out of that. Make a complete picture. So my brain is always solving problems. It's always puzzling. And I think that I lead people to where they need to be by figuring out the pieces of the puzzle.
So okay. So with a jigsaw puzzle, you have these tiny pieces,
Mhm.
and you sometimes have a picture of what the overall puzzle needs to look like.
Mhm.
So when you're approaching a situation from the perspective of a woman, are you looking at that situation for each individual piece, or are you looking at it like, this is the end result we need?
I think that more and more in the last 5 years, I've realized that I look at the big picture. Um, I have an idea in my mind, and I don't know how intentional it is, but I have an idea in my mind of where we're going. So with my son, it was, I know that you need to learn from this experience that you're a great human being and that you have a ton of potential, and that stuff comes along the way and we make mistakes and we learn from them and we move on, right? So my end vision is that he'll continue to be a great kid and maybe a better kid because of this. So how do we puzzle to get to that point? Those are the things we're trying to figure out. I have a vision for where the Legacy Center is going to be. And I'm not a person who can say, well, in 5 years, I want us to have 5 more staff members and serve this many people. But I know what our mission is, and I know how we need to be affecting our community. And I am always driving to that. And I'm always looking at that big picture. And then within that, what are the puzzle pieces that today we have to put in place in order to help us get closer to that ultimate vision? So it can be something small. It can be, I know that I want to get to grow this piece. We're not meeting this need. How are we going to meet this specific need? I need to change, I need to increase staffing by this much. How are we going to get there? It's this giant puzzle. And I'm always puzzling toward that big picture.
Okay, so let's talk about the big picture of Kathryn Tate. What is your big picture? Where do you want to end up?
Oh man, I don't know. Isn't that funny? I can vision for all kinds of other things, but visioning for myself is a different question. I don't as with
With your home life, with yourself.
So when I was in high school, my junior year English, our teacher asked us to draw a little piece of paper and write on it like where we envision ourselves. And I think that this has held true for many years. I said, I want to silently change the world. And now at the time, I didn't realize that I'm totally an introvert. So like we've said, this is a stretch for me. Speaking in public is not a stretch for me. Mingling is. So if you don't see me at events, that's why. But I'm not looking for attention. What I'm looking for is to make a difference in my own little corner. What does that look like? I don't know what that looks like in 5 years, but I believe that when the right opportunity comes by, I'm going to know, because it will fit that vision of quietly making a difference in this world. Where I sit today, I know I'm quietly making a difference in the world. Now, it may not seem quiet, right? But it is just this little teeny tiny sliver of what's happening.
I know you're making a difference. There's stories that I've heard coming out of the Legacy Center. And when you came in today, I gave you a hug.
That's true.
I was like, I feel like I know you already. You're awesome. You're doing amazing things. Give me a hug, girlfriend, because this is where we're at, right? This is where we're at, and this is what's happening. So let's go back to little Kathryn. Little Kathryn.
Okay.
And who was in your life as a young person that was pouring into you?
So there have been people along the way. recently I've been reflecting on a few coaches. I was in diving when I was a kid. My very first diving coach was somebody that poured into me. And I don't know. I think that was just a process of learning to trust someone else and knowing that somebody else believed in me. Um, I have had a few camp counselors. I went to church camp every summer, and there were a few camp counselors that saw in me a lot more than I could see in me. And 30 years later, I look back and I go, "Oh, yeah. Yeah, they saw something. They were right." Um,
They told me they told me a long time ago. I just wasn't listening.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
typical teenager,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Um, and then there were some teachers along the way too that believed in me and challenged me, and sometimes didn't believe in me, and I had to prove myself to them. And I think that's another thing that made me who I am today, is that internally I have felt it a few times in my life where maybe I didn't have to prove anything to anybody else, but I felt like I had to prove myself to somebody, and I think that made me harder, like tougher.
You felt like you had to prove yourself.
I had not my first dive coach, but my second dive coach. I often felt like I had to prove to him that I could do it.
Why?
I don't know. He was a little tougher. He was just a little rougher around the edges, and I think I don't like to let people down. I like to make people happy. Um, and and when I feel like when I sense that I've let somebody down, I will push myself harder to make sure that I fix it.
Do you feel like you have that trait now still?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Mhm.
So as a leader / people pleaser / does not like to mingle, you have found your feet on the ground and your head in the sky. You're standing tall. But you're a people pleaser.
Oh, absolutely.
How do we navigate day to day with that?
That's probably the trickiest thing for me. Um, because in a leadership position, sometimes you have to do things that are tough, and sometimes you have to deal with people, situations that are uncomfortable. Um, I think I try to lead in understanding that we all come from different perspectives and we all have value. And that makes the conversation easier anytime that you have to work through something tough. Um, I I think, I don't know, sometimes it just sits in my stomach, in the pit of my stomach for weeks until I deal with something. I have learned that sometimes if you have to deal with an issue, you need to just deal with it a little faster so that it doesn't make me sick.
Just rip the Band-Aid
Yep,
off.
and usually it turns out okay. But I think when I approach something with respect and facts, it's a lot easier to get to a place where there's a mutual respect. And very rarely, as a people pleaser, rarely do I think that people, like, I don't think there's a dislike happening most of the time. It's just we're on different pages. So a lot of it is in messaging and
And that's okay.
Mhm.
It's okay to be on a different page as someone.
Yeah.
They still have that value.
Yeah.
They're just on a different page. Sometimes
Right.
a whole different book completely. But so you've mentioned a few times in the last hour that you've reflected on something.
Mhm.
Is reflecting and going back on memories something that you do commonly? Like, is
Oh,
is
gosh,
that
yeah.
something? Oh, okay. Tell
All
us
the
about
time.
that.
All the time.
Really?
Mhm. Yeah, those, like, I will replay every conversation 15 times, and I will prepare for it in my head 15 times before it happens, and,
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
both. Both. I mean, on the one hand, by doing that, I'm more prepared when I go into something. On the back end of it, though, it's not really healthy to replay it because it doesn't help. It doesn't change anything. Um, but, I am really self-reflective. I also tend to think about, um, who I am and where I've gone, and I reflect back on the people that this conversation. I reflect on stuff like this on a regular basis.
Well, it'll be recorded, so you're good.
And I'm sorry, I'm talking really fast.
No, you're
Um,
good. You're so good.
I just noticed sometimes I do that.
Oh, Kathryn. So we are talking with Kathryn Tate, who is an amazing woman, a pillar in the community, especially over in Midland, Michigan at the Legacy Center. We're learning a whole lot about leadership and confidence building and pouring into others. And oh my gosh, we're talking about so much. There's a lot that we've covered. But I have to ask, when you're going through your day-to-day routine, because you have a job that is incredibly dynamic, especially as a leader, what is something that you do for yourself? She's laughing again.
So to be fair, I don't do a lot for myself. And I think that I was thinking about that one ahead of time. I don't do a lot for myself. Twice a year, I go and get kind of nerdy and I go on a quilt retreat. And that separates me from, the day-to-day grind. I don't slow down a lot, but my brain's always working. So even if I am slow, I'm always processing something. So I know I would say the thing I do is I take time to be with my family every day. And maybe that's a few minutes in the car in a great conversation. Maybe that's helping out with one of my kids' activities. Both my husband and I do a lot of that. But those are ways that I do care for myself, but also pouring back into other people does fill me.
That's a big deal.
Mhm.
Okay. So we've had women on the show who are just they're like, I have to deeply pour into myself. Like, I am leaving on vacation. I am doing the spa. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm going for the run. I'm doing this. And you're telling me that pouring into the community, which is what you do
Mhm.
for work, refills your cup.
Mhm. Yeah. So I just started coaching my son's diving team, and it's like been a blast and a half. And let me tell you my proudest moment. I was judging at a meet, and I told the kids right before they started, I said, "I'm not going to be over here to support you guys. You have to support each other." And so the first kid went, and it wasn't the greatest dive, and it didn't go as well as sometimes it goes in practice.
Yep.
And he got out of the water, and my son walked over to him and gave him a fist bump and said, "Good job." And then the kids started to, after every dive, they were fist bumping each other. And before I knew it, the kids from the other school and my kids, every time every kid did a dive, they fist bumped down the line.
How did that make you feel?
And I was like, there's nothing better than that, because I'm helping them become better human beings. I'm giving back to the world, and that fills me in a way that no self-care fills me.
You were quietly changing your corner of the world.
Mhm.
Well, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I know that we wanted to touch on a few things about patience.
Yeah.
In the last 2 minutes.
Okay. Yep. You asked me to think about what I would tell someone else. And my journey these last 5 years has been being patient with yourself, and I've heard it's cliche, because you're becoming who you're supposed to be. I spent a lot of years not knowing. A friend of mine once told me that he felt like he was on the backside of the tapestry working on this tapestry, and he didn't know what it was going to look like. And then he came around to the front side and he saw this beautiful picture. And I think that I spent 35 years kind of on the backside of that, trying to working and trying to figure out who I am and where am I supposed to be. And I kind of have had a glimpse of that as I've come through. And it's about being patient and listening to your gut and knowing when it's time to say yes, because your gut says this is good. And as you build those experiences, the good and the bad, you're becoming who you're supposed to be. And it just takes patience. And it's okay to be in that icky, slow space. Eventually, you're going to come through and you're going to see yourself and your confidence. And you're going to find it.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Kathryn Tate with a whole lot of advice for you. And Kathryn Tate, thank you for being on the show.
Oh my gosh, it was my pleasure. It was fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's what she said. Thank you.